Once a Toys R Us kid?
Always a Toys R Us kid.
Hey guys, hello gorgeous. I've gotten a couple of requests on the channel for my thoughts on the closing of Toys R Us, and I've responded in the comment section, but I figured I'd do a video too for the people who don't read through the comments. My thoughts on the closing of Toys R Us, I actually gave my thoughts. I covered it in a video last year, the Michael Mercy 80s Toy Museum Part 1. So that video has gotten a lot of views. I'm sure a lot of the subscribers of the channel have already seen it, but if you haven't seen it, check that video out. I'll put a link for it at the end of this video in the annotations, or watch it again to get a refresher, because I really couldn't do a better tribute to Toys R Us than I already did in that video. That video starts with how Toys R Us was the most fun place for me to go as a kid. It was like a theme park or Disney World for me. And I cover in the beginning of that video also how the feel, the vibe of the store had changed over the decades. And I'm a big fan of a lot of things from the 80s, and it's because of the energy, the feeling in the air during the 80s. It seeped into so many things. TV shows, movies, cartoons, animation, comics, toys. I just feel, having been on this planet for as long as I've been and watching the attitudes change throughout the decade, it really is true that decades kind of have a life to themselves. There's like a collective vibe, a collective consciousness, energy, and it seems to shift every, I don't know if it's every 10 years, maybe it's every 8 or so. But I definitely feel as though, having lived through the 80s, the 90s, the aughts they're called, and then this past decade, there is definitely an attitude shift. Now I'm talking about societal changes and attitudes, and this is supposed to be a video about Toys R Us and toys. But I think it's important to take a step back and take a look at the bigger picture, because the big picture is what affects the little details. And in that video I covered that I felt like Toys R Us had gone far away from what it originally was, and it was just because it was changing with the times. It doesn't matter what store you go into, everything changed with the times. And I also said in that video that it wasn't about what was on the shelves, it was about who was on the shelves. And the characters have changed too. The motivations of characters. I am still so into characters like He-Man and Optimus Prime and Duke. Characters with a sense of duty, selflessness, warriors, but they're peaceful warriors. They're not, the term is badass, and I think it's so overused today, badass. Badass to me doesn't encompass compassion and empathy. Quite the opposite, actually. It's a narcissistic thing to me, being a badass. It's a disconnected thing, a self-absorbed, egoic, solitary thing, being a badass, an anti-hero. And anti-heroes are cool, don't get me wrong, Snake Plissken, the man with no name, but I like heroes. I like traditional heroes. That works for me better in my day-to-day life, and a lot of this stuff inspires me in my day-to-day life. And I prefer the traditional heroes like He-Man, Optimus Prime. Getting back to Toys R Us, I can't be sad about it because I already said goodbye years ago. They got away from this guy. He still shows up here and there, the stuffed animals and stuff, but back in the 80s when Toys R Us first came to my town, it was all about Jeffrey, and they actually had people dressing up in a giant Jeffrey costume at my local Toys R Us. And I don't know if I'm remembering it right, but I feel like there was like Toys R Us specific happy music playing in the store, not just Muzak or radio music. It felt like an event more than just shopping at Toys R Us. The colors were so much warmer too. There was orange and brown on the sign, and over the years it just seemed to shift more to what everybody was shifting to. More of the clean look, the corporate look. They got away from the dress-up stuff, the making it an event for kids. And like I said, the heroes also changed too. Things became more cool, more sleek, more badass. and society as a whole moved away from the goody two-shoes type of mentality that a lot of heroes existed in the 80s and before. And these days it was more about being cool. It was more style over substance. And I just noticed this happening, and I knew this was going to happen for quite some time. So I can't sit here and be sad about the end of Toys R Us in the States. They announced bankruptcy months and months ago, so the writing was on the wall. I'm always advising and recommending awareness. Be aware, pay attention, and connect the dots. Announcing bankruptcy months ago means they're going out of business most likely, and that's what's happening now in the States. Apparently the stores are still going to remain open here in Canada. I've got one right in my hometown here, but like I said in the Toy Museum video, when I go to that Toys R Us, I don't know how many of you out there have a friend or a family member who has some sort of mental illness or something like Alzheimer's, where the body is still there and breathing, but the personality is no longer the same. It's gone. So I still enjoy going to that Toys R Us, but it's kind of like visiting that family member who's not there anymore. The walls are still there. The building is still there. It's still the same floor I used to walk as a kid, and I get a little bit of nostalgia for it there. But as far as who is on the shelves there, all of my old friends, all of my old heroes are gone. They're not there anymore. And the ones that are still there, like the Transformers or whatever other line, Voltron, reimaginings and reboots, they're not like they used to be. They look like they're more style over substance for me. So it's too bad, but the writing was on the wall. Walmart has helped put Toys R Us out of business because for decades now, I've been seeing that toys are so much more expensive at Toys R Us than at Walmart, and it's a technique Walmart used to do this, to put Toys R Us out of business, to put a bunch of other businesses out of business. They undersell on certain items to get people to come in and spend money on other items, and I think toys was one of those things that they sold for less than they should have been or could have been selling them for, in order to get the families in and to sell clothing, to sell the other products. So I'm not surprised. I can't be sad. The warning signs were there for a very long time. It's inevitable. I guess that's the big message that I want to convey. The magic word of this video is inevitability. If you really pay attention, then nothing should surprise you in your life. And Toys R Us, I might not be sounding very warm and emotional in this video, because I did it in the Toy Museum video. It meant so much to me that I created a little piece of it here. So I mentioned in that video, the Toy Museum video too, that every time I walk into this room, I get that same feeling I got walking into a Toys R Us in the 80s, not today or over the past couple of years. So it's unfortunate that Toys R Us is going away. I feel most bad for the people who are losing jobs and are going to be out of work now. But have faith, something else will come up. For every door that closes, another one opens. And if you're an original Toys R Us kid and the news hits you really hard, check out some local toy conventions. There are tons of great retro, vintage, 80s, 90s toy conventions going on all across North America. Here in my part of Southern Ontario, there seems like there's one every couple of months in 2 different cities. So that's another great place to walk into a big room with a whole bunch of other like-minded people and experience that vibe of the 80s that has been gone for a very long time. That's instilled, immortalized in plastic and plush. It's still out there. You just gotta look for it a little bit. Sometimes you gotta wait for it a little bit. But trust me, it's still out there. If you're a Toys R Us kid and you've got a Toys R Us memory you'd like to share, scroll down and go to town. And to join the tribe, hit subscribe. What do you think, Jeffrey? Can you do it? Nerd mistake.